Good evening. I'd like to call the regular meeting of December 16th, 2025 to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Clerk, can we take roll?
Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Here.
Councilmember Carriaco.
Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tempore Kasdan.
Here.
And Mayor Perotti.
I'm here.
And for the record, the City Council voted at the onset of closed session to approve the mayor's remote participation under emergency circumstances pursuant to the Brown Act.
Thank you. Before we begin, we'd like to introduce our live Spanish interpretation service for tonight.
Buenas noches, tenemos interpretación disponible al español si alguien prefiere. Tenemos auriculares en el salón de al lado. Good evening, we have interpretation into Spanish available if anybody prefers. We have headsets in the next room. Thank you, gracias.
This is working. 1 second.
Thank you. At this time, we will have
Of
public
course, I tuned in
forum
right
for
when
items.
Spanish translators.
Oh, Mayor Pro
the
Tem, while
podium,
we
so let me
work on
see.
some technical
Oh, Spanish.
issues, I'd also like to do a report out of closed session before we
Okay.
move to public forum as well. Okay.
Don't-
So we read 3 items into the closed session record earlier this evening. For 2 of them, there's no reportable action. I did want to note for the labor negotiation item that's listed on the published agenda and was read into the record, that pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.1A5, the City Council considered in closed session a proposed negotiated 3.7 salary increase for the SEIU bargaining unit and amended the formula for the cost of living increase. Formal approval will be considered as part of item D1, so that is part of the open session agenda, but draft materials associated with that consideration have been made available at the clerk's station this evening and additionally online.
Thank you. We're good?
Yes.
Okay, then at this time, we will have public forum for items not on tonight's agenda, but within the subject matter jurisdiction of the city. Clerk, do we have any speakers for the public forum?
Yes, I do have 1 hand raised on Zoom. I do have 1 speaker slip. Our first in-person speaker will be Rich Foster. All speakers will have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. It's just lovely to be here. 2 different things. One, a number of people I know who live on Berkeley, who are usually 80 and 90 years old, have commented how nice it is to have the street repaved. So if you haven't heard from them, they're happy about it. They are really questioning what the hell's going on with the striping, because there's 2 stripes 10 feet out from the curb. The stripes, the street lanes in the middle are 19.6 feet apart, center line to center line. There's no center line in the street, and now it's evidently a bikeway because it has the big bike things right up the street. So, you know, either way, that was the comments. They're happy with the pavement. About a half dozen different people aren't too crazy about the striping on it. They certainly would like to see a center stripe. Secondly, I see that the comment period for the EIR on the best plant to the Planning Commission has opened up between now and January 8th. Then that, you know, the council's always expressed concern for public safety, whether it was pedestrians or bicyclists or other hazards in our community. And though battery backup plants have gotten safer and are very safe overall, there is still a risk. According to Wikipedia, the failure rates put at about 0.3%, which is the same failure rate as having a fire in your residential home nationwide. The difference being is the fire department can actually put a fire out in your house. They cannot put a fire out in a best plant once it starts. They can only cool the surrounding units to try and keep it from spreading to other places. One analysis of a 1,280 watt megawatt facility, which is ours is going to be 30, put the potential fire risk at 28% or 1 fire every 3.5 years, because each of these containers has thousands of little batteries in it. They said that, of course, was that project specific, and technology depends on the project, but it's worth looking at. The fire in Escondido burned in 1 container for 13 hours, putting out toxic smoke. The The exclusion zone for around a fire initially is 300 feet, but it also says firefighters should stay upwind and uphill from it. Well, across the street from the proposed site, where you're going to have to rezone to do this, there's a retirement community with 60 people, some of which aren't even mobile. And 700 feet away, you have a school with 327 students, plus faculty, which are in the range of the prevailing winds out of the west towards the school. So if there is a fire, there's a risk. We have an airport where we have an exclusion zone around the airport for safety. If a plane does crash, hopefully it's not going to go down a residential area. Is that likely to happen? Probably not. But if it does, you got a problem. That's the problem with the BEST plant located where it is. It's not a matter of being anti-BEST or anti-green. It's a question of whether this is an appropriate site for it to be next to a senior facility, residential. Santa Maria passed a quarter-mile restriction on it, so I'd urge you to follow their fine example. And thank you for serving. Thank you.
Okay, we do have one hand raised. April Reed, if you'll unmute yourself, you'll have 3 minutes.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So this is a continuation on my repeated statements about Kenwood Village. As I've said before, Councilmember Kiriakou indicated to me many months ago, well over a year ago, that if there was building on Shelby, that there wouldn't necessarily need to be building on Kenwood, or that would be a way to stop Kenwood, or the best way to stop Kenwood. I read in the Independent that you now have sufficient housing to satisfy the state, so there doesn't seem to be a need for Kenwood anymore. I do want to make sure that you all follow through with your promises. I did speak to both the Planning Commission and the Design Review Board at their meetings the last few weeks, and told them what Councilmember Kiriakou had told me. So I just want to let you know that I could have put it out there and let everyone know what was going on, and I want to make absolute sure that the Shelby property is built correctly and properly, and that if the state needs to know that you're transferring any building projects from Kenwood to Shelby to make up the total number of developments that you need, or apartments or housing that you need, that it's done properly. I don't want to hear that you guys screwed it up, or that it was done mistakenly or not done properly, so therefore you still have to build on Kenwood even though you don't need the property to build on. All of you, except I don't know about Ms. Smith, but most of you did run on being slow development, and that being your preference, and that's what you for. So let's see if you guys follow up on your promises to the community when they voted for you. That's all I have for now.
Thank
And I have no other speakers.
Okay, City Manager, are there any amendments or adjustments to the agenda?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. There are no amendments or adjustments, but I can introduce City Manager update. We do have a short presentation from our Public Works staff tonight. So I see Autumn Glazier, our Assistant Public Works Director, and Michael Winnewiser. He's the Project Manager for the San Jose Creek Multipurpose Trail. We thought, since this is a very large project and one that hasn't been before the council for a while, that maybe we just do a short update. We can certainly come back in 2026 and do another update, but this is a big legacy project for the city of Goleta. We lumped it in and called it the Big Five when we did the State of the City last year, you might remember. The idea for this project goes back a long time, 15 or 20 years, multiple funding sources, long schedule to complete, very complicated, going under the railroad and the freeway. Don't want to steal all their thunder, but yesterday, construction technically started. You may have not seen any activity out there, but they're on the clock now, so to speak, and it's a pretty long project. You'll hear from them. But we just thought we'd give the council and the community a short update. on this exciting project now that it's about to start construction. So turn it over to the two members from Public Works.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. As our city manager said, I'm Michael Winnewisser, the project manager for the San Jose Creek Multipurpose Path Project. And it's my pleasure to give you this brief presentation / update on the project and the current status. So first, I'd like to quickly remind everyone of the scope and the purpose of the project. Not to reiterate too much of what we've been hearing from the city manager, but I'll quickly just start saying the path is composed of two segments. The northern segment extends from Calle Real to Kellogg. It'll ride under Highway 101 and the railroad, and it'll pop out at our already completed portion of the trail between Armitos Park and Johnny D. Wallace Park. The southern segment then connects South Kellogg Way to Atascadero Bikeway, or the Auburn Trail, by coasting along the San Jose Creek by the 217. So Public Works staff are very excited to say that the notice to proceed for construction was issued for yesterday, December 15th. The project will start with clearing and grubbing, as well as tree removal work in the northern segment. Again, that is the area between Calle Real and Armitos. I really want to highlight our effort to follow the mitigation and restoration protocols that are required by the project's environmental permits. Our team has conducted a lot of pre-project environmental surveys on the ground. We kept an eye out for all the sensitive species in and around the trees, and we planned mitigation plantings at several spots. So rest assured, if there's a tree marked for removal, our biologist has their eyes on it. The mitigation sites, or the locations where the restorative work will be implemented, are the San Jose Creek at Johnny D. Wallace Park, in Old San Jose Creek at Eckwell Street, in Devereaux Creek at the Elwood Mesa, and along the northern and southern segments of the project itself. A total of 2.8 acres will be restored for mitigation. That's just over 2 football fields worth. Additionally, while approximately 60 trees will be removed, approximately 330 trees will take their place. Additionally, this project is being funded by around $30 million in grant funds. Overall, this path will prove to be instrumental in improving Goleta's active transportation network, making walking and biking easier, safer, and more connected for our entire community. That concludes our brief update on the project. Thank you for this opportunity, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Councilmember Carioca.
When do you anticipate, if everything goes right, when would you reasonably anticipate completion?
Councilmember Kiriakou, we would anticipate in probably spring 2027, if everything goes right.
If everything goes right. Thank you for that. I mean, this is a project that has been out there as a community promise since at least 1993, when the county, when we were still in the county, a group of individuals got together and helped create the Eastern Goleta Valley Community Plan. So it's so nice to see us really getting to be on the threshold of completion of this project that is going to connect northern Goleta to southern Goleta, Old Town Goleta to the beach to Cathedral Oaks, to be able to get on a bike and start over by the pickleball and tennis courts on Kellogg and finish at Goleta Beach is just a really exciting development. So thank you so much for all your work and everyone who's worked on this over the years. Thank you.
Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Thank you. I share the enthusiasm and excitement. For the grants, are there any timelines or deadlines associated with any of those grants that would, that mean you have to meet certain milestones?
Councilmember Lewis Reyes Martin. We do have a couple deadlines. There are 4 grants on this project, and they have varying anticipated end of construction. They range from 2 years to 5 years, so they're all anticipated to be after our current completion date.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Very exciting. Actually, it strikes me when we started construction for the airport, we had a ribbon cutting. Are we going to have at some point some sort of, to celebrate the initiation, equivalent ceremonial event?
We are planning a groundbreaking ceremony. The first order of business is this clearing and grubbing, and there are a lot of permit restrictions to when work can take place. So the bulk of the work will start in early next year. So our goal is to have a groundbreaking closer to that point, probably March or April.
Okay.
And we are working on that.
Very good. Thank you. Okay. Then clerk, if you, actually, do we have public comment? I guess not really on that. No, we already did, yeah. Okay, so clerk, if you would read the consent calendar.
Yes, thank you. That is item A1, approval of the city council meeting minutes, December 2, 2025. Item A2, acceptance of the September 2025 investment transaction report. Item A3, acceptance of the October 2025 investment transaction report. Item A4, 5-year review and annual financial report of the City of Goleta's development impact fees for fiscal year 2024-25. Item A5, amendment number 3 to agreement number 2022-018 with DocuSign. Item A6, legislative platform for calendar year 2026. Item A7, letters of support for the Protect Patriot Parents Act. Item A8, public works professional services agreements with M&S Engineers, Inc. and DKS Associates, Inc. Item A9, increase the construction contingency amount for the 2020-25 arterial pavement project. Item A10, approval of the 2025-2026 agreement for operation of a free countywide library system. Item A11, Goleta City Grant and Community Development Block Grant Guideline updates and cycle initiation. Item A12, award of professional services agreement to New Beginnings Counseling Center for operation of a safe parking program in the city of Goleta. Item A13, amendment number 1 to professional design services agreement 2024-064 with KTUNA for phase 1 of Stowe Grove Park renovations. And item A14, notice of completion for the Johnny D. Wallace Neighborhood Park Splash Pad and Park Improvements Project.
Thank you. Do any council members wish to pull any items from consent?
Yes, A7 and A14.
Okay, A7, I'll try those. I'll never find it. Okay, A7 and A14. So let me ask first, are there any Oh, Paula, your hand's up. Or excuse me.
Thank you,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to make sure that I recuse myself, abstain from voting on the minutes of December 2nd because I was not here.
Okay.
Thank you.
City Attorney, is there anything that we need to do as far as voting goes when we vote on the package? Have it?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. It's a good question. I would just take that item separately, and the mayor will just abstain from voting.
And you had?
Yes, I just wanted to pull briefly item A9.
Okay.
The pavement.
Oh, that's a good one, too. Yeah, good choice. You had A7 and A14. Okay. Well, why don't we start with A9, since that's happy news for the most part.
Yes, and I just pulled this item. I was what's being proposed is an opportunity to expand some paving projects. So I'm hoping that our public works staff will share some information.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council, Councilmember Smith. So with the favorable bids we got on the 2025 pavement project, we're currently negotiating doing some
rehabilitation work on Pacific Oaks Road from Hollister Avenue to Phelps, Cayo Real to Salisbury and Rochester Way, and Vidura Avenue from Carla Drive to Vega Drive. Those are the three main change orders we're focusing on and negotiating, and it looks very favorable, and we should have that signed in the next week or two. And then with any funding left over, we're going to try to add additional rehabilitation work to the Stork Avenue between Hollister and Boley Drive. The other thing I want to add is that the work that we're doing on the three change orders that I discussed is a bridge gap. So this can last anywhere from 3 to 10 years. So it'll buy us that time that we need for the major reconstructions that most of those streets need. So I think it's a good return on investment.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that information.
Thank you.
I don't have any other comments on the item.
Okay. Well, why don't we do then A14 next, since that's also Public Works. Actually, I guess that's Johnny D. Walls. That may be Neighborhood Services. Anyway, would you like to?
Which one do you want me to do first?
14.
14. Okay,
Yeah.
let me.
It's kind of
let me
related.
Let me switch from one letter.
Oh,
to
I
another.
got you
That's
out of
okay.
order.
Guess who do I want up here? Jaime or no, Joanne? I really don't have any questions. I just wanted to pull this. But I wanted to pull this with you there. This has been a long time coming. The Old Town neighborhood has been waiting for a place to keep cool and help get through the hot summer months and sometimes the hot spring or fall or even winter months that we have here in this beautiful community. And I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done to get us to this point. This project has taken a long and winding road. I know it's been really challenging. There have been human resources challenges, there have been technology challenges, there have been other challenges that I won't get into here. But it's just so nice to finally be at this point. I just wanted to make sure I thanked you or someone from staff publicly for everything you've done to get us to this point. I'm so happy that next summer, next May, we'll be able to actually open it up. I've been having so many of my constituents bring this up, like, when's it coming? When's it coming? My kids want to go over there. My kids want to go over there, and they've seen the progression of the site, and when it was tarped up, and then suddenly it wasn't tarped up, and does it mean it's opening? Yeah. So I'm just so happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Carriaco.
Yeah, I would just. It was a long and winding road covered with tarantulas and scorpions and rattlesnakes, and that winding road didn't say it enough.
You mean metaphorically, right?
Yes, I do. Okay. It will be a lovely splash pad.
It'll be safe
with
for
nary
kids.
a tarantula in sight. Kids can play without rattlesnake fears.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes, good. And would you like to take up A7 now?
Yeah, A7, this is a more serious item. So a treasured member of our community, Juana Flores, was very unexpectedly taken away from her family, her children, her grandchildren, her neighbors, her community members, again, just a month or so ago. And this has been the continuation of a years-long, decades-long fight for Juana to be able to stay in this country, to be able to provide for her family, to be a part of her family, and to do so without fear of being snatched on the street or, in this case, snatched from a regularly scheduled check-in in Santa Maria with ICE. And it shouldn't have happened. It's an act of cruelty, but it's not an act that I find to be surprising from who we're dealing with these days federally. But I'm so glad that we have Congressmember Carbajal fighting for Juana and so many other parents who are undocumented in this country that have service members in their family, their children and grandchildren serving their country, like Juana and so many others. And so I'm so glad that our city is willing to, again, be willing to provide some support and encouragement on behalf of Congressman Carbajal to the different members of Congress that will be responsible for whether or not this bill can make it out of Congress and get to the president's desk for signature. And I appreciate the support of all my colleagues. It mentioned a couple in the staff report, but I think everyone sounded like they were in concurrence on bringing this back. So I just want to acknowledge that. And also want to give a special shout out to Mayor Prodi and Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan, who were here for earlier iterations of this matter and this item and have been staunch supporters of Team Juana and her family.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment? Okay. Then are there any public comments on this item?
Yes, any member of the public who wishes to speak to a consent item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. And I'm seeing no public comment.
Mayor Pro Tem, I'm happy to move items A1 and A3 through 14.
Okay, that excludes the minutes?
I'm excluding the minutes. I assume, did I get the right number? I did not.
Thank you, Councilmember Kiriakou. I believe the mayor is recusing from A1 for the
A1,
meetings
okay.
for.
So, all right, so I'll move A2 through 14 as one motion so we can all participate.
I'll second.
Okay, good.
Okay, Councilmember Reyes Martin,
Aye.
Councilmember Kiriakou,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tempore Kasdan,
Aye.
and Mayor Prodi.
Aye.
Okay, now we get to have the exciting vote on the minutes. Would anyone like to make a
I'll
motion?
move approval of item A1.
I'll second.
All right, it's a tough vote.
Councilmember Reyes Martin,
Aye.
Councilmember Kiriakou,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tempore Kasdan,
Aye.
and Mayor Prodi.
I'll abstain.
Okay. So we're ready for the public hearing. So clerk, would you read the next item?
Yes, thank you. That is item B1, consideration of an urgency and non-urgency ordinances amending section 17.41.030 of the Toledo Municipal Code regarding accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units to comply with recent changes in state law and finding the actions to be statutorily exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act under section 21080.17 of the Public Resources Code.
Oh, okay. We've opened the public hearing, and can we have a staff presentation?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan and council members. So we are here once again to update our ADU regulations. We'll walk through some of these edits. The packet itself, there's two separate ordinances. We'll touch on that again later in the presentation. The content of those two ordinances in terms of the amendments to our regulations are identical, but we're presenting them as an urgency and non-urgency ordinance, and we'll talk about why we're doing that during the presentation. So those two ordinances are attachments 1 and 2 to the staff report. As we typically do with ordinances, those are in a clean format, so you're not seeing the actual changes within the ordinance itself. So we also have attachment 3, which walks through and underline and strike through what's actually changing within section 1741.030 of the Toledo Municipal Code. I'll be doing the presentation along Andy Newkirk. I'm Andy Newkirk. I'll be doing the presentation tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Newkirk.
Also with me tonight is Cam Odra, who's one of our planners in advanced planning who's helped us put together this packet. Ann Wells is online with us tonight as well. I did want to note that particularly with ADU regulations, this is really a team effort. We scramble almost every year now to update our ADU regulations, and we wouldn't be able to do that without the help of BB&K walking us through those legislative changes and what we need to do to update our code provisions. So this is really a mutual effort between the City Attorney's Office and advanced planning. And I should note, Peter Imhoff as well is in the audience with us. So it's really a large team that tries to get this in front of you each year with the end of the legislative session in the fall. So if you go to the next slide. So we have a standard process here for our hearing. We'll do the staff presentation, entertain council questions, take public comment, and then go to deliberations. And again, we're seeking action on 2 items here. So with that, we'll jump into the edits here. And I do want to stress, or first I'll mention kind of, we are seeing this a lot. This has been certainly in the housing realm the most commonly addressed item in Sacramento. And each time the state changes the regulations, we work to update our own provisions. So there were actually 4 bills this legislative session that were signed into law by the governor, regulating or changing the rules related to ADUs and junior ADUs. And so we have to, the reason we do this almost every year now is we need to update our regulations by the beginning of the calendar year to reflect the changes in state law. Otherwise, our local provisions become null and void. We don't have a lot of discretion when it comes to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. We do have a little bit, and we want to retain that, particularly where a project needs a zoning permit. There's some things, some objective design standards within our ADU regulations and some setback requirements that we want to hold on to, and it's really important. So that's why we kind of bring this item back every year and kind of on the short timeline. But again, what we're presenting tonight, we really have very little range of motion on. In most instances, we really have none. We'll flag a couple instances where there's a little bit of discretion on how we implement these changes in the state law, but again, very little in terms of what we can do other than what's being presented to you tonight. So going into the changes themselves, the first is a very minor clarification in terms of what's allowed for the size of ADUs and junior ADUs. There are certain instances in state law that limit the size of ADUs and junior ADUs by definition or in certain circumstances, but the methodology of how you measure that space was not clear in the state law. So this has been updated, and we're updating it in these ordinances to make it clear that those square foot measurements are the interior livable space, and that term is defined in the regulations. The next item is kind of clarifying what a property owner is entitled to in terms of ADUs. There's 4 instances in which an applicant doesn't need a planning permit. They can go straight to the building counter and just go through building to get an ADU. 2 instances for single-family lots and 2 instances on multifamily lots. The law wasn't explicit as to whether these were mutually exclusive on a single-family lot. You could do 1 or 2, or if it was additive, you could do both 1 and 2. And so that a clarification has been made that they're additive. So you can get, if you have a single-family lot, you can get both categories 1 and 2, and if you're on a multifamily lot, you can get categories 3 and 4. Next, and if you look at the underlying strike through in attachment 3, the kind of the biggest added language is really just process timelines, clarifying exactly how much time we have during intake and to make like a completeness determination, and then once we make that determination, how long we have to either approve or deny the ADU. So just kind of fleshing that out. One place where we have a little bit of flexibility is we have to allow for appeals of incompleteness determinations. And the piece of flexibility we have is whether those appeals go to Planning Commission or City Council. We proposed and Planning Commission supported those appeals going to Planning Commission, as this is a pretty minor appeal, and we felt that was better served at Planning Commission. But that is something that we have discretion over as to who that appeal body is. Next up is ADU processing in the coastal zone. The way the process works now is we essentially defer to the Coastal Commission as to whether an ADU in the coastal zone needs a coastal development permit, because we are not able to issue those. And then we just make that a requirement when they go to building. Either they get a coastal development permit or they have some kind of documentation like a waiver from Coastal Commission staff. We've added in this notification requirement that when we get an application, we have to notify the Coastal Commission. That's a new change in state law. We've also added, and this isn't a requirement of state law, but adding in a requirement for an ADU permit when in the coastal zone. So this would be in addition to anything that's needed by the Coastal Commission itself. And the reason we did this is it helps standardize the process inland and coastal, that in all instances where you need a planning permit, you'll get the ADU permit. And it helps us kind of formalize and apply those updated timelines in state law. So we think this is an improvement that was needed. A very small change. Currently, ADUs only need to provide fire sprinklers if the primary residence requires fire sprinklers, and that requirement in state law has been changed to also apply to JADUs. So a junior ADU needs fire sprinklers if the primary dwelling needs fire sprinklers. We don't come across this issue very often, but we will apply that change. Then we have junior ADU owner occupancy standards. Currently, a property owner must reside either in the JADU or the primary dwelling. There is no owner occupancy requirement for regular ADUs anymore, but there is still this requirement for JADUs, and it's been watered down a bit so that this owner occupancy requirement only applies now if the JADU shares sanitation facilities, and what we're talking about there is really a bathroom with the primary dwelling. The next item is when we will allow certificates of occupancy for an ADU in disaster-affected areas. This is really a reaction to the fires down south of here and an effort to really expedite getting residential units back on site. So this wouldn't cause any changes currently to our process, but if there was a disaster declared in the county, the allowance for issuing a certificate of occupancy for the ADU before a primary dwelling was rebuilt would apply. But again, that won't change anything here in the short term at least. And with that, I'll pass it off to Cam, who will give a couple final last edits within this packet.
The next issue area is related to impact fees, and the current municipal code shows that ADUs that are 750 square feet or smaller are exempt from development impact fees, and JADUs aren't specifically exempted at all in our language. And in the proposed changes, junior accessory dwelling units that are 500 square feet or less are outlined to be exempt from development impact fees. And since JADUs are defined as being 500 square feet or less, that essentially exempts them. And in addition, any ADU or JADU under 500 square feet would be exempt from school impact fees. So this next slide is just about new state law updates that don't require any amendments to the zoning code. The first topic area is state law changes prohibiting JADUs as short-term rentals. The city already prohibits both ADUs and JADUs from being used as short-term rentals, so we're already consistent with state law, so no changes are required. And the next area is HCD submittal requirements. The state law requires cities to submit any adopted ADU ordinance to HCD within 60 days. A new requirement is that we need to respond to any HCD findings within 30 days, and if we don't meet those deadlines, an additional provision states the ordinance becomes null and void. To address this, the proposed ordinance, specifically Section 5, formally directs staff to submit the ordinance to HCD within the required timelines. And on this slide are a few additional cleanup changes included in the ordinance. First off, deed restrictions are not required for ADUs. They only apply to JADUs, consistent with state law. And second, we've updated and added cross-reference citations through the chapter to make it easier to navigate and for internal consistency. And lastly, we made several clarifying edits, including updated clause language and clearer subsection titles to improve the readability and interpretation for staff. Finally, a note on the California Environmental Quality Act. Under state law, CEQA does not apply to a city's adoption of an ordinance that implements state ADU law. So this ordinance exempts and no additional environmental review is required. And with that, I will pass it back to Andy.
Thanks, Cam. So again, we have two items in front of you tonight that we're requesting action on. Two ordinances. The first would be the urgency ordinance, which needs a 4/5 vote. That would be an adoption of the ordinance, and that would become effective immediately. So we would have these updated regulations in place when the bulk of these state law changes go into effect on January 1st, and that allows us to apply our full ADU ordinance. And then the second would be to conduct the first reading of the non-urgency ordinance, which would need to come back for a second reading in January, and then would become effective and supersede the urgency ordinance in February. But again, the content of these two ordinances are identical, and they are reflective of the changes that have been presented to you tonight. So with that, we are happy, that concludes our presentation. We're happy to take any questions that council may have.
Thank you. Councilmember Kiriakou.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. That was a great report, Andy. And I just have two really just kind of clarifying questions. On slide number 6, the ADU permitting process slide, there's text that says that we have to determine completeness within 15 days. I just want to confirm, is that business days? And then my follow-up would be, does that count days that we may be closed, for example, when we have our annual City Hall holiday closure? Do those count against us, or are those exempted from the requirement?
So it's my understanding that it's just calendar days, so we have to be pretty flexible. And that's where we have to be really clear on what the submittal requirements are to make sure that we're getting in a good application and can make that determination quickly.
Okay, so staff needs to really be paying attention, kind of getting around that November, December timeframe.
That's right.
Thank you. And then just one other question on the next slide on the coastal zone. The proposed change notification to Coastal Commission, changing from the current process of deferring to Coastal Commission for planning permit. Once we pass our local coastal program and we no longer have to go to Coastal Commission for everything, would there be any changes to what is on this slide, or would it basically, we would just notify Coastal Commission no matter what?
So Councilmember Kiriakou, the notification will still be a requirement, but what kind of permits we process will change. So like our ADU regulations would have to change when we're certified, because the edits are really written for a non-certified city.
Okay, well, thank you. You made something that's really not very straightforward, very straightforward.
Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Thank you. I mean, I think that the challenge is it's straightforward because there's not much we have discretion over this. I think that first slide you have that shows all the years where we've had to make changes, and it's essentially every year. I think that really exemplifies the position we find ourselves in, just trying to keep up and make sure we are updating our ordinances so that we're in compliance. I had just a couple of questions along the same lines on this 15 days. That is such a short amount of time. And my first thought was also about what a burden that is for staff in the event that you had a lot of applications at once. And of course, this is an unfunded mandate, for lack of a better term. So I assume that the staff does have, some mechanisms in place to try to make sure that you don't miss something that comes in. And related to that, what happens if that 15 days comes and goes and staff hasn't completed a review of an application?
So Councilmember Reyes-Martin, first, let me re-answer Councilmember Kiriakou. It's 15 business days.
Business days, okay.
But
still pretty short.
But I don't know that considers like a city decision
closure,
to close.
right.
So, and so kind of the default is if you don't make a completeness, it's deemed complete. If you don't approve or deny, deemed approved. So these timelines are, if they're not met, they're beneficial to the applicant. And yes, one thing about I don't know how current planning would feel about this or the building department, but because there's so little discretion, there may not be as many application submittal requirements, so it's a little bit of a simpler submittal checklist. So that can become a little bit easier. So there's but yeah, it's certainly something that staff has to be aware of. But again, a lot of these applications are fairly straightforward now, because there's so you're not going to see big studies involved, like those types of things that are often like included with more complicated applications.
Thank you. And then my only other question is, I noticed noted in the staff report that this went to Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission unanimously voted to move this forward. Did they have any just comments or concerns that are noteworthy for the council to know about?
Councilmember Reyes-Martin, I think the conversation was fairly brief. I think there was, probably a general sentiment,
that,
both of what limited scope there is, and then also that's been taken at the state level from local jurisdictions, but there wasn't any really in-depth discussion on any specific changes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate the staff's efforts to help us as a city retain, what discretion we have. Just a quick clarifying question on the changes regarding the deed restrictions, just to clarify that that's referring to owner occupancy deed restrictions. Is that correct in terms of having those apply to the JADUs?
So one of the things in those deed restrictions is like that they can't be used for short-term rentals, for instance. So it kind of documents with the title maybe some of the limitations, but we've lost that with ADUs, but we can still have a few things listed on those deed restrictions for those JADUs.
Okay, so the short-term rental prohibition would only apply to the JADU?
Councilmember said, no, it'd still apply. It just wouldn't be recorded in the same way as like we would have historically.
I
There's
see.
that deed restriction kind of recording of the limitations
Right.
associated with that ADU.
Okay. That's an interesting. So moving forward, if there were any concerns about that issue, I mean, that would sort of be, I guess it remains sort of a complaint-driven process. Like if a neighbor or if there was suspected that there were some violations either related to the short-term rental question, it would be sort of a complaint-driven process. Is that correct?
Yeah, Councilmember Smith, it'd be kind of through the standard code compliance enforcement process.
Great. Thank you. Those are my only questions.
I guess I'll, following up on that last one, from when we're able to know where all the short-term rentals are coming from, and to the extent, even if it's not deed restricted, we would know the address is an ADU that is currently barred from offering a short-term vacation rental. So we would be, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we would be in a capacity to enforce that even if there's not a deed restriction because of our monitoring of short-term vacation rentals. Does that sound right?
So Mayor Pro Tem Kazin, yes, we have that tracking information for short-term rentals that are listed, and we also have documentation in our permit tracking system of when an ADU or a JADU building permit is issued as well. So we do have that data. What's actually happening on the ground may be more complicated as to like being sure that it is actually being used as a short-term rental. The listing would help, but if it's not listed, that might be more complicated. But we do have those data sets available to us.
Yeah, as I understand from finance, they get it reported about when there's short-term vacation rental usage. So the other question I just had was local coastal program. What's the status? We've submitted it and it's now being considered, or where does that sit?
Mayor Pro Tem Kazin, we are currently working through workshops with the Planning Commission on revisions to our land use policy recommended by Coastal Commission staff. So we met on December 8th with the Planning Commission to go over some of those proposed edits from the commission staff, and we will continue that in January. So we have not submitted an LCP application to the Coastal Commission at this point. We're discussing in public for the first time potential revisions to our policies.
I see. So they have a sort of a heads up. They review it and give us comments, and after we've satisfied all of their observations, questions, comments, complaints, then we submit it, and presumably then it's a clear path.
Mayor Pro Tem Kazin, they've reviewed and gave us underlined strike through on our policies. We would have to go back and actually adopt changes to policy and changes to regulation and then submit that updated language to the commission. So those are kind of big picture of the future steps.
Okay. And are we talking about, I know this isn't the topic, but in the next year or so?
I'm looking into the planning director. We're working diligently. I don't know exactly when we would expect to submit, but I'll defer to the planning
I
director
guess
on
it
that.
sounds like it's a big deal, a big workload.
Mayor Pro Tem, it is a big effort, and Andy and Advanced Planning have been really doing, very solid work in making those changes, coordinating with Coastal Commission staff, and now bringing it through the local process. And you are correct. As Mr. Newkirk described, the idea is to front load this process so that we work together with Coastal Commission staff so that what comes out of our local adoption process will hopefully meet with Coastal Commission staff support. And it will then be certified more easily by the commission. And the intent is that we will get through our local hearings, Planning Commission, and then Council in the coming calendar year and be able to submit to a full LCP submittal to the Coastal Commission by the end of 2026 or very early 2027.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Perotti, did you have any?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Not any questions. They've been asked and answered. But I just wanted to thank Andy Newkirk and Ann Wells for their work on this. And I have opportunity the last few weeks to review a lot of meetings that we have on file. And I did watch the Planning Commission meeting. And so this really helped to watch that and then have your presentation. It's very clear. And I just want to thank you for your time and your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public speakers or public comment?
Members of the public, for those of you on the Zoom webinar who wish to speak to this item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. I'm seeing no public comment.
Okay, thank you. Any other council comments or questions? Okay. Then I'm closing the public testimony portion of the hearing, moving to deliberations. And if there is no other deliberations, I will entertain.
Sure. First, I wanted to just thank the Planning Commission for reviewing this item. I think, state law, we want to make sure that we retain what discretion we have. And, the other changes, appear reasonable. So I would move approval. Of this item, I guess, in terms of the staff recommendations A and B, I would move that we adopt on a 4/5 vote the urgency ordinance number 25 next in line, entitled an urgency ordinance of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, amending section 17.41.030 of the Goleta Municipal Code relating to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, and finding that the action to be statutorily exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act under Public Resources Code, section 21080.17, case number 25-0005-ORD. And also B, to introduce and conduct the first reading by title only and waive further reading of ordinance number 26 next in line, entitled an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, amending section 17.41030 of the Goleta Municipal Code relating to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units, and finding that the action to be statutorily exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act under Public Resources Code, section 21080.17, case number 25-0005-ORD.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay, let's vote.
Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Aye.
Councilmember Kiriakou.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tempore Kasdan.
Aye.
And Mayor Perotti.
Aye.
Okay. Shall we move to the next one?
That'll be our first discussion action item. That is item C1, report on University Mobile Home Park activities and consideration of City Council options regarding such actions.
So thank you. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Mayor and Council. The purpose of this item this evening is to present Council with possible actions and policy options that the city could take regarding the regulation of mobile home parks in the city. This item came about in response to fast-moving and rapidly evolving events surrounding the recent change of ownership of University Mobile Home Park on Pine Avenue in Old Town and its purchase by Harmony Communities, Inc. We received notice just in the last 24 hours that park residents have now reached a settlement with Harmony Communities regarding a proposed rent increase and have withdrawn their petition under the city's existing mobile home park rent control ordinance challenging the rent increase. Senior housing analyst Lucy Graham is going to provide a little bit more background on recent events in a little bit more fine-grained detail, and then I'll walk through the possible actions that staff identified that the city could take in response. So I'll pass it off to Ms. Graham.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem and Council, I'll give some more details and introduce the park for anyone who's not familiar. Here in the city, we have 5 mobile home parks, and University Mobile Home Park is the only seniors-only park that we have. It's located in Old Town, south of Hollister, and has 80 spaces. About 80% of residents own their mobile home. And the park is subject to Chapter 8.14 of the Goleta Municipal Code, which is our mobile home rent control ordinance. In, I think it was mid-October, sometime in October, the park was sold, and residents were notified that Harmony Communities was going to be the new management company, although they were retaining the same on-site manager. Then on October 30th, notices were sent out to inform residents of a pending proposed rent increase and proposed rule changes, namely a change to an all-ages park rather than seniors only. And also notices of termination were sent to the residents renting mobile homes in the park at the same time. So on November 14th, Park Management hosted a meeting regarding those proposed new park rules and regulations, after which the final set of rules and regulations were sent out to residents. And then on November 18th, a meet and confer session was held in compliance with the requirements of our rent control ordinance related to that proposed rent increase. Staff was in communication with park management and park residents after that time. And finally, on December 10th, we received a petition for hearing. It was submitted and signed by a majority of eligible residents in the park. So that's 50% plus 1 of residents who own their mobile home who are not subject to a long-term lease. And then on Friday, we verified that petition was valid. But we also heard that residents were working to come to a settlement agreement with the park manager and owner. And that resulted, as Peter mentioned, yesterday in a withdrawal of that petition for hearing because they had successfully come to a settlement agreement with Harmony. And so today, we sent notification that, yes, we acknowledge that the petition has been withdrawn. So that's the full rundown of what has happened recently there.
So thank you, Ms. Graham. And so council at a recent council meeting directed staff to investigate options and return with options and analysis for council's consideration to address some of the issues that were raised by the events that Ms. Graham recounted. Staff working closely with the city attorney's office identified 3 categories of possible actions. These actions are not mutually exclusive. They could be done all three could be done or none of them could be done. But I'll give a rundown, just a brief summary, and then go in them each in a little bit more detail. So the three basic categories of actions would be first, to monitor what other local governments are doing and engage in legislative advocacy at the state level with respect to mobile home park regulation. And to some extent, that's something that staff is doing already with respect to monitoring what other local governments are doing. And we did do some research in the context of the preparation for tonight's hearing and looked to see, not in great depth, but as time allowed, to see how other jurisdictions had handled similar circumstances. Then the second broad category is to look at and update the city's existing mobile home park rent control ordinance, which I alluded to previously, which happens to be something that's on our annual work program already and that we are planning to do. And then the third broad category would be for council to consider directing staff to study and return for council consideration with potentially an urgency ordinance that placed a moratorium on mobile home park conversions from seniors only to all ages, and or adoption of a senior mobile home park overlay, which are actions that are similar to those taken by Santa Barbara County and some other local jurisdictions like City of Thousand Oaks. So I'll go through each of those categories in a little bit more detail and then allow council to ask us questions and discuss them. And I invite the city attorney to weigh in on these as well, since we did turn to the city attorney's office for advice in looking at some of these options. So the first category, again, would just be for staff to monitor what is happening statewide, to track what other local governments are doing up and down the state as they're faced with similar challenges or issues with respect to mobile home parks, specifically rent increases that affect mobile home park residents, and rules changes such as eliminating seniors-only mobile home parks in favor of all ages mobile home parks. So the council could direct staff to research and to continue to monitor local governments and what they're doing, and then also to participate in statewide efforts to advocate for changes to state legislation to address the unique challenges that face mobile home parks. And in doing so, the council could consider perhaps forming a standing committee or an ad hoc committee to focus on these issues, or simply direct staff to monitor these and report periodically back to the council. And that would involve then inherently monitoring and coordinating with other local governments that are facing similar issues, and then consider changes to our local mobile home park regulations in response. The second broad category is really to take a look at our existing regulations on the books, which consist principally of an existing mobile home park rent control ordinance, which we inherited from Santa Barbara County at the time of incorporation. That ordinance resides in the Goleta Municipal Code as Chapter 8.14. It is out of date. It is something that was adopted essentially in its existing state from Santa Barbara County and has not been touched since. So that, as I mentioned, is already on our to-do list. That is something that we intended to do anyway as in our annual work program. And we have the authority under state law to update that consistent with state law. So some possible changes that we could consider as part of that update would be, first of all, just administrative changes that do things like eliminate the distinction between homeowners who are on leases and those who are not for purposes of who may challenge a rent increase, include potentially a mediation process as an alternative to the arbitration process that our current ordinance contemplates. We could put more onus on the park owner to file a petition for rent increases rather than place it on the tenants and residents after the fact to challenge rent increases once they happen. And we could do things like clarify definitions, standards, and rules for hearing in the ordinance. One of the other somewhat antiquated pieces of regulation we have on the books are the rules for hearing that we also look to, the county rules for hearing that govern the arbitration process. And those are things that we'd also probably want to look at and update and tailor to specifically to the city of Goleta. Another broad category that we could look at as part of this update would be regulating rent increases directly, and we can modify the provisions for automatic increases. Right now, the existing ordinance and state law allows for automatic increases of up to 75% of the consumer price index. And so we can consider changes to that framework, for example, allowing flat rate increases or changing the allowable percentage increase based on the consumer price index. We could really look fundamentally at what rental increases are allowed. And then we could also look at more fundamental possible changes to the ordinance. For example, adding base rent requirements that allow for fair return increases periodically over time. We could add vacancy controls that specify when a park owner can increase that base rent for vacant units. Mobile home parks are not subject to the state law known as the Costa-Hawkins Act, which regulates rent control for other kinds of units, and which in other circumstances allows landlords to reset rents for vacant units to market rate. So mobile home parks are not subject to that law, and there's no reason why the city couldn't limit the ability of mobile home park owners to reset the rates, rental rates for vacant units to market rates. So the new ordinance could change that so that rents cannot be reset automatically to market rates with every vacancy. We could also change the rent increase application and review procedures so that those are fundamentally changed and brought up to date. And then finally, we could change the administration of the mobile home park rent control ordinance itself. For example, the city could create a new public rent review board or appeals board to review and approve rent increases rather than assign that role to staff. So there are a wide range of possible options that the city could choose from, and we're the council to direct us to go forward and to proceed as we had intended to under our annual work program. We would bring back another policy item to look at those options in more detail and to get council direction, to get public input and council direction so that we could return with a draft ordinance that met council's policy direction on that point. Then the third broad category of possible actions that the city could take would be to follow form essentially to what other jurisdictions like Santa Barbara County or as highlighted in the staff report, City of Thousand Oaks have done, and study and consider or direct staff to evaluate the feasibility of an urgency ordinance that placed a moratorium on converting senior-only mobile home parks to all ages and or create some kind of a mobile home park overlay zone for senior mobile homes. And so if directed, we would return to council with that analysis as quickly as possible. As it happens, the city has 6 months from the announcement of the final rule change, which, as Ms. Graham noted, did not happen prior to November 14th, that meet and confer meeting. We think it happened shortly after that. So we have 6 months from that date before those rule changes become final. That's because for non-consenting homeowners, changes to park rules respecting age restrictions cannot take effect before 6 months from the final notice of those changes. An urgency ordinance would, of course, require a 4/5 vote of the council to approve, and that would take effect immediately. And as noted and highlighted in the staff report, both County of Santa Barbara and City of Thousand Oaks did take similar actions to prevent the conversion of senior-only mobile home parks in their jurisdictions, although the factual circumstances for County of Santa Barbara and City of Thousand Oaks are different from the City of Goleta. And one key fact is that there are simply more seniors-only mobile home parks in those jurisdictions. There in the county, there are 11 seniors-only mobile home parks that were affected, and in City of Thousand Oaks, there are 5 mobile home parks that are seniors-only, whereas University Mobile Home Park is the only seniors only mobile home park in the city of Goleta. So we may not it may not warrant going to that length. It's also worth noting that County of Santa Barbara is presently in litigation with Harmony Communities, Inc. Over those actions, and that litigation has yet to be resolved. So with that, I'll complete our report, and we're happy to take questions. This is a complicated area, and again, we did look to the city attorney's office for guidance on this, so I'd invite Mr. Rosen to participate in any questions that we're not able to answer.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any desired? Okay, then Councilmember Kiriakou.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I guess I'll start near where you finished, which is there are other jurisdictions that have taken action on behalf of their constituents at many different 55 and over mobile home parks, whereas what the city is contemplating is whether or not to take any actions or explore potential options for its only 55 and over mobile home park. And I think that's a really important place to begin, because we need only look at our general plan to see that one of our major goals in our general plan, one of the major housing goals in our housing element that we recently adopted, was preserving housing for special needs, and one of those specific special needs is lower income seniors. And there's quite a few lower income seniors that are dependent upon having access to that affordable housing at that mobile home park. So from the standpoint of what might guide our actions here, do you feel, and maybe the city attorney can weigh in on this too, do we feel like being consistent with our county housing element, following the goals of our general plan, is a good basis from which to make a decision on whether or not to pursue the options that are contained within the staff report?
Mayor Pro Tem and Councilmember Kiriakou, I would say generally that, I mean, the city certainly wants to preserve available housing, and we want to preserve available low-income housing. And mobile home parks do provide functional low-income housing. We also, of course, do want to address special needs like housing for seniors, especially affordable housing for seniors. I don't know that in this instance that because we only have one seniors-only mobile home park that it would make a really big difference in meeting those goals to specifically create an urgency ordinance or an overlay just for this one mobile home park. But in general, we certainly want to preserve affordability in mobile home parks, and recognize the important role that mobile home parks play increasingly in a very expensive housing market. They are really the last bastion of market rate affordable, and that even there, that is slipping.
Right. No, I mean, I think when it comes to preserving and whenever possible, developing new options for seniors that are lower income, I think we need all the solutions we can get our hands on, right? And, you know, coincidentally, this Friday, we're going to be breaking ground on Heritage Ridge, which is really focused on permanent supportive housing for lower income seniors, very low and very low income seniors being one of the primary beneficiaries. So, you know, I think what we're contemplating here is like, what are the different tools that we can add to our toolbox in addition to the existing tools that we have to look out for our seniors at a time in our state where it's been called the silver tsunami. We have a big group, a big cohort of folks that are going to be retiring, and California is just becoming more and more expensive, and we just need all the solutions we can get our hands on. So I appreciate what you said there. Let me move on. You spoke earlier about, I think it was a 6-month window that needs to expire before a mobile home park ownership or ownership group could change the rules of the park. And can you remind me, what was the phrase that you used? What was the criteria for when it would have to be 6 months?
Sure. So in this case, the new park owner, Harmony Communities, proposed certain rule changes, including changing University Mobile Home Park from a seniors only to an all ages park. They had a meet and confer meeting on November 14th, which I happened to attend, and then thereafter gave final notice of those rule changes. And under I believe the state law that applies for non-consenting homeowners, those that did not agree to those rule changes, the changes to the park rules cannot take effect before 6 months from that final notice. So that would allow the city a window, if we wanted to regulate in this area, to take actions such as adoption of an urgency ordinance that would then take effect prior to the effective date of those final rule changes.
So then here's my question, because my understanding is the representatives of the park and the representatives of the mobile home owners have only been negotiating on the rent increase. So my question is, how is it recorded, how is it memorandized, whatever the proper verbiage is, of non-consenting? How is non-consent stated? What is the process for determining when non-consent occurs? Because I want to make sure, as we contemplate whether or not we intervene using our powers, our strong legislative powers, I want to make sure that we're clear on what has or hasn't happened and what may need to happen for the mobile home park owners if they wanted to try and work directly with Harmony themselves, rather than having the city come in and exercise its legislative powers. So I just want to be clear on what is non-consent.
So I think Mr. Rosen might want to reply here, but I think the answer is simply a signature on the proposed rule form. So I believe that the residents received proposed rules and were requested to sign the form and return it, and that would be the indication or evidence of consent. We would have to research and gather information to understand better exactly the facts here, which we do not know in detail.
Yes, and Councilmember Kiriakou, to echo Director Imhoff, the Civil Code section that Director Imhoff is referencing for consenting versus non-consenting homeowners doesn't provide a lot of detail about what constitutes consenting versus non-consenting. I agree with Director Imhoff. Consenting would likely look like a signature regarding those revised rules. With respect to negotiations, the city's understanding, although I don't know that we have firsthand knowledge, but the city's understanding is the park owner sent sort of what they constitute the final rule changes, which includes the conversion as part of what was sent out after the meet and confer that Director Imhoff referenced on the 14th, which, as Director Imhoff mentioned, starts that 6-month window. It's a 6-month window by which the County of Santa Barbara took action in regards to similar circumstances.
Okay, so the packet that the mobile home park owners received that included all the rule changes and everything else, that included, I believe, a place to sign, and I believe it gave them a deadline by which to sign. So could we reasonably suppose that mobile park home owners that did not return the packet with a signature would be non-consenting? Is that a reasonable assumption?
Councilmember Kiriakou, I wouldn't want to make a representation of that without knowing directly the specifics of what's been happening between the park owners and the tenants. I don't feel equipped to give a definitive answer.
Okay, so then I guess my follow-up question is, if there were none, just hypothetically, if there had not been an expression of non-consent, when would the Harmony owners be able to put those rule changes into effect? Would they go into effect immediately? Would they actually already be in effect because that deadline had passed in the packet?
Councilmember Kiriakou. So the way I understand it is consent is shown by an affirmative consent, such as a signature. And because this topic involves the whole park being a seniors-only park, all of them would have to consent. And so if one of them didn't, then that would mean that the 6-month clock runs. And so 180 days from November 14th, I believe, is May 13th or about there. I'm not sure if that's
Okay.
6 months exactly, but around there.
Okay, so then that being the case, or at least as potentially our interpretation, that would provide some time if the tenants wanted to try and negotiate, a pause on the rule change, a suspension of the rule change for the time being in case they want to take any other actions. I've heard some discussion that they want to try and buy the park from the management and ownership. So I just want to make sure I'm just kind of clear on the right of way here. So it sounds like we likely have time to do either an urgency ordinance or potentially a regular ordinance, which would then go into effect, I assume, after, second reading in 30 days.
Councilmember Kiriakou, I would note, I think, to a point you raised, the 6-month window is the applicable window for the city to take action. So it's separate and apart from what might occur for sort of a private negotiation between the parties. But to Ms. Graham's point, it's sort of the time period under which the city would be working. I would say, provided what the city council's direction is, the urgency ordinance does require its own amount of due diligence and certain findings. So I would say realistically that within that window, there would be time to do a urgency ordinance. I wouldn't want to represent on the record that the city would have the time to do a full ordinance during that window.
Thank you for that clarification. I think what I'm trying to get at is whether or not the folks that live at the park would have a window of time where they could try and work collaboratively with the management. They've been able to negotiate, a compromise on the rents. And I just want to make sure that they have an opportunity, if that's something they want, to try and negotiate a compromise with the ownership. But if I hear from the mobile home park owners tonight that they don't want to negotiate this point, they want the city to go ahead and take certain actions, and I would certainly be very open and receptive to hearing those arguments. I'll stop for now. I know there's a lot of other lights on.
Kiriakou, I also just wanted to note a couple of other things. So first, the proposed rule changes were not limited to just the change in seniors only to all ages. They covered a wide gamut of things. At the meet and confer meeting that I attended on November 14th, the park residents talked through it. The meeting was a little bit awkward because unfortunately the Harmony representative wasn't there in person, but they talked through in detail a lot of those proposed changes. And I don't know at this point in time, I see there are a number of public speakers here, some of whom may be park residents who may want to address this. I don't know what the stakes are at this point in time, whether they're satisfied having resolved the rent issue via settlement, the rent increase issue. Perhaps they've also gotten assurances with respect to the rule changes that matter to them. So that's something that they may wish to address in public comment.
No, absolutely. I mean, they may still have questions about how the utility calculations are being changed and adjusted, and the assumptions behind that, the data collection behind that. I know I can think of a lot of things that they might want to revisit with the management. I just don't want to presuppose that it would just be one thing or many. I'll stop for now.
Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Thank you. I don't necessarily have any additional questions. I have a lot of comments that are probably more appropriate when we start to deliberate. But I did want to maybe just for clarification, and you addressed some of this as you were going through the 3 possible actions. It strikes me that they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, and you're already doing some of that. So it does seem like when we get to that, it may be combinations of some of these actions. But thank you so much for the excellent report.
I did have a question. The senior designation, I guess I wasn't clear. Is the only thing that impacts that people can't sell or rent to non-seniors, but it doesn't have any other, the rent control is a separate issue. It just simply determines that no families can go to the park? I mean, I guess part of it is why is there a need for a discussion about an urgency ordinance? Why have these jurisdictions taken up that kind of thing for what doesn't seem to me to be such an awful thing that family moves in.
Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan, that is my understanding that the limit, the only thing that affects is who units can be transferred to where one resident at minimum has to be 55 years or older. And of course, I mean, there are wider housing needs in our community than just seniors. But I guess for other jurisdictions that were faced with this question, they felt in their particular factual circumstances that the seniors-only mobile home parks provided housing specifically directed toward that age group. But again, the factual circumstances in Goleta are a little bit different.
Yeah, no, I guess I was not clear because I could see the urgency and the critical quality to the rent control changes that's going to, have a dramatic impact on people's income, but who it could be rented to didn't seem quite as consequential. Along the same lines, the timing with the urgency ordinance and so forth, I would gather it's only relevant to the extent that people want to leave and rent it out to somebody else. In other words, if the residents aren't moving, aren't changing, it's not a relevant issue. I guess where I'm going with this, it seems like there's not a lot of urgency. It's not that there's a wholesale flood of people looking to leave and rent to somebody else. It would just be one at a time over the course of years where you would see a change.
That's my understanding as well. So the rules change would not affect either the rent itself, which would be a distinct issue that would be subject to our rent control ordinance, and it would be a prospective change that would not affect existing tenancies. So existing tenants who are seniors could continue to live in their units per the terms of their rental agreements and our ordinance until such time as they decided to move.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I assume, like all rent control, the rents then get raised up for the next tenants that moved in. So there's quite an incentive to stay where you are.
Sorry to interrupt, Mayor Pro Tem, that would depend on the terms of our rent control agreement. And again, mobile home parks are not subject to the Costa-Hawkins Act. So that is something that the city could limit to prevent
The move
vacant
to
units
market
from
rate
being raised to market rate.
after somebody leaves.
Correct.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I could add on to that. So our current ordinance does have a provision for increase upon sale, and it's no more than 10% as long as it's been 60 months since the last sale. So there is some type of rent control provision there for vacancy.
And one last question. While we only have this single mobile home senior facility, we have a number of other locations in the city that are senior-oriented. Is there any kind of, I don't know, that we would want to think about it, that there's some overlap or there's some connection between some of these other senior places and this one, so that we shouldn't think about this in isolation, but in the context of the others? Is it relevant?
Mayor Pro Tem, you're correct that there are other senior facilities, assisted living facilities, and senior housing options in the city of Goleta, just as there are a number of other mobile home parks. But the mobile home park regulatory framework is really unique and it's distinct, so it really has to be considered separately because of the way in which mobile home parks are regulated under state law.
Okay, that's it. Councilmember Smith.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem, your questions triggered some questions in my mind. Is it possible? I guess first I would just note that, I think that there's a degree of expectation in terms of, I'm presuming that most of the residents of this park chose this park, and probably one of the factors was that it's, geared towards seniors. So sort of that reliance on on that rule has a degree of value and potential urgency to the residents there. The other question I have is, so we've already seen, so it sounds like those who are purely tenants who are renting mobile homes, not just the space, that there's been certain notices that have already gone out to them. I mean, is there anything that could prohibit, eviction notices to go out to every single resident in terms of being evicted from their spaces? I don't know if that's known as it relates to any of these rules.
I don't think we know the answer to that question.
Okay.
Councilmember Smith.
Yeah, I'm just sort of thinking out loud if there might be, I don't know, potential efforts to try to, I don't know, change or a desire from the owner to seek to sort of change who's there at the park. It may be that the negotiated resolution on the rental issues has mitigated that risk some, but it's just speculation on my part that there could be some of that activity there. The other comment I would notice, though, is that in terms of option 2, in terms of looking at our mobile home park ordinance more broadly, it's my understanding, if we looked at sort of some of those broader issues, that those various different items would impact all of our mobile home parks, not just, the one senior park. Is that correct?
That is correct.
The other thing I would note, too, is I guess we say 1 out of 5, but and I don't know the number of units of all of our parks, but, that's still roughly, maybe 20%. I mean, it's percentage-wise, I guess it's still significant in terms of, I don't know for the county what percentage, 11 represents. Is it 11 of 100? Is it 11 of 20? Again, I don't have those numbers, but just off the top of my head. So those are just some comments I had in reflection of those questions. I have no other questions at this time.
Okay. Mayor Perotti, would you?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Well, it seems to me, after listening to all of you, there's still a lot of questions that we all have, and I'm really anxious to hear from, hopefully there are folks that in the audience, I can't see them, that will speak to some of the agreement. And I'm glad that they moved quickly on this, and there seems to be somewhat of an agreement, but I think there's some answers that, questions that need to be answered first. And so I'd like to hear from them. Thank you.
Okay. You have commanded, and so shall we go. Can we hear from the public?
Yes, I do have 4 speaker slips. For those of you on the Zoom webinar, please use the raised hand icon if you'd like to speak to this item. Our first speaker is Fred Slillman. And all speakers will have 3 minutes.
Madam Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Fred Sleeman. I am the president of the Mobile Home Park, University Mobile Home Park in Goleta. Myself and others are here to represent the park and their concerns. And our main concern is to maintain the park as a senior citizen occupant park. We do have, and I heard some of the comments and some of the questions, and maybe I can shed a little light. As far as the residents, we do have signatures of residents that have signed that they want to maintain the 55 and older age park, being the only park in Goleta that has that designation. We also have pictures historically that prove that park was designated as a 55 and older park. Back as far as 2009, we have leases by the previous owners that state that. So most of the residents that are residing there now are under that lease or that agreement when they bought into that park. And it's the only park within other, there's 5 parks. We're the only park that has that designation. And that's why we're fighting to maintain it. In October, we received a notice that the park was sold to Harmony and the new rules, regulations, in addition to a proposed rent increase. I heard you speak about the rent increases. We did come to a negotiated settlement with Harmony on rent increases, and it has been signed and agreed upon by the majority of the residents. We're here to request that this council exercise whatever there is within its authority to maintain our park as such, 55 and older. And there are others here that would like to speak on that. I thank you very much for your time, and we really would appreciate you taking this matter, as we have, very seriously. Thank you again for your time.
Okay, our next speaker is Emmett St. Onge.
My name is Annette St. Onge, and I'm a resident of the University Mobile Home Park. First, I'd like to say thank you for those of you serving on council, and a special thank you to Mr. Kiriakou and Mr. Imhoff and Ms. Graham, who have been working closely with the residents and trying to get some resolution as quickly as possible. It seems like Harmony is coming in and they want to make changes quickly, maybe unfairly. I'd like to encourage you to adopt the option to continue working on it as you're doing with your annual work. But in the meantime, vote for number 3, option 3, that is the urgency moratorium that will help us maintain it in the meantime. We, as you're all hyper aware, we do have a affordability problem in this area, especially for seniors, and we don't want to lose that. It would hold 80 homes that are specific to that group of people. And one thing we don't want to happen is if the number 2 takes longer, we don't want people to come in that are underage and then they say, well, it's too late, because we are not going to want to evict those people once they're established. So I think we do need the number 3 urgently. We want to maintain that while you continue to work on number 2. That's really all I have, I think. Thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay, our next speaker is Lawrence Bohm.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Wanted to say I stood up here 25 years ago when we were fighting Daniel Guggenheim. He was trying to eliminate rent control in Goleta for all the mobile home parks. That went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and they refused to take it, and finally he went away. But that was a 2-year episode. So hopefully things will go better this year. I've been I've been there 27 years in University Mobile Home Park, so I've seen a lot of changes. It has lots of older people in their 70s and 80s, A lot of them have health problems, cancer and all kinds of things. And if it becomes an all-age park, it would change. People would not be able to have the quiet and peace that we have now. So it's very important that we, protect the people that are there now, that have health problems and so forth. So I'm just urging the city council or whoever to have a moratorium or whatever we can do to stop the changes that they're trying to impose on us. So thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Phoebe Mansur. And a last call for those of you on the Zoom webinar who wish to speak to this item, please use the raised hand icon.
Hello, staff, city council. I was going to make a joke about me living in a senior mobile home park, but we appreciate the time and attention that staff has given to the mobile home, Goleta University Mobile Home Park. At our first meeting with Harmony, they made it very clear that they were unwilling to change any of the rules, any of the proposed rules. Since then, we have established a more respectful working relationship and believe there may be an opportunity to continue discussions on several rules that residents find unclear or unacceptable. To date, no residents have signed the rules agreement. Our question is whether residents are allowed time to continue negotiating these issues with Harmony during this 6-month time period while we have this period of cooperation with Harmony, or whether a decision must be made now in order for the city to step in and review or address the rules. Thank you.
And that concludes public comment for this item.
Okay, Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Are we ready for some just comments?
Perhaps, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to Ms. Mansour's comment.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I would re-articulate, I think, what I stated on the record earlier. For purposes of the council, the city is working within the 6-month window under the civil code relative to potential city action. So I don't know that the city could really provide legal guidance for the residents on the potential negotiation that they're having with the park management.
But that we would have the opportunity to incorporate an urgency ordinance anywhere in that time window.
The city is within the window to consider the urgency ordinance. And if that were the direction of the council, I think the city would move as quickly as possible, as stated in the staff report, to bring something back to the city council.
Thank you. Council member?
Thank you, and thank you for the public comment. And yes, all of the work that staff has done, and our city attorney and Councilmember Kiriakou, who's been so engaged with the residents. It's a really serious issue. I was very glad to hear that there's a negotiated settlement on the rent increases. That was definitely of huge concern. And I would say for me that the outside of that, the next most important priority for me is to do anything we can to maintain it as a senior, a mobile home. And I'll say a little bit about why. Because I don't think it's about saying that you don't want families there. I don't think it's fair to really pit, different populations, against one another. I think actually the fact that this is the only of the mobile home parks in Goleta that is senior only is more compelling to me about why there's a need to preserve that. In my district, while I don't have the privilege of having a mobile home community, I do have another 55-plus community that I represent in my district. And you are absolutely right. It is a unique community. It's a beautiful, unique community. The services, every part of that community is with the lens of what is needed for an aging resident. And it's a really wonderful place for that kind of population. They even bring in, speakers or have different activities that are really tailored for seniors. So I feel really strongly about doing whatever we can as a council to preserve that. I was even making and reminding myself in my notes, we recently had a presentation, I think that was from the county, about their report on aging, and that we have an aging population and that the needs for that population are growing. Highest among that list are issues around affordability. We know that healthcare costs are high and going up. So anything that is within our control to help on affordability for seniors is really important to me. So I could go on and on about why I think it's so important. So I would be in support of, I know we've talked a little bit about continuing to monitor, what's going on. I support anything that we can do on legislation. I'm sure there's things already in our legislative platform that fit nicely into, any advocacy we can do as a city, and anything we can do to really do what we can to preserve it as a senior mobile home park.
Councilmember Kiriakou.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. All five of us are your elected representatives, but I have the privilege of being your district council member and having you be my constituents directly. And constituents reached out to me several months ago to keep me up to date on what was happening and that there was going to be an ownership change, and it was looking like it was going to be one particular outfit, then it ended up being a different outfit. And it's been a real honor to work with these constituents and these residents and talk to them about what's been happening in their community, what's been going on in their lives. I've also had the misfortune of having to listen to some really excruciating stories, people being evicted, Section 8 people being evicted. And it's been a real struggle to not form a bias and to just jump to a conclusion. And I really feel like I've bent over backwards to be fair to Harmony. I proactively reached out to them ahead of this meeting and had conversations. Some of the comments that I made earlier about perhaps they would be willing to negotiate with the residents as they had on the rent increase. Those were kind of hopeful comments. I wanted to see if they would speak during public comment. We didn't hear from them tonight. They're not here, and I think that says a lot. And I think that really makes it easier to go with this where I've been feeling like we may inevitably need to go, which is to have some policy change. And I think it's important that we have policy change for some of the reasons that were illustrated by Councilmember Reyes-Martin about the uniqueness of this community, being the only senior living facility that is a mobile home park. The city has done so much and is in the process of doing so much to try and make the quality of life better for these residents. We're working on a new walking path, a new bike path, additional street parking, to make it easier to get in and out of there if there were ever a disaster. And I really want to see those investments in the quality of life of these residents make your lives easier, not make your lives cost a little bit more because someone thinks they can make more of a buck. And so for me, I see no other conclusion but to go forward with option 3 and to start down the process of doing an urgency ordinance that doesn't preclude Harmony from stepping up to the plate between now and when that would be adopted, and see if they can come to some kind of conclusion that would satisfy the folks that live there and come up with a mutually agreeable solution. At this point, I don't think I'm going to hold out too much hope for that based on what I've seen tonight. But I feel like I also want staff to come back with some of the additional options. I'd also like to get some clarifications on things. For example, when you do a rule change, shouldn't all of the people that are residents be entitled to be communicated with about that rule change? Why is it only the mobile park unit owners that were receiving notifications? a number of the tenants there, a number of the folks that live there are monolingual Spanish speakers. I don't recall seeing a single copy of the proposed rules in Spanish. I certainly don't remember there being any discussion about a workshop that would be provided for those folks that would be in English and Spanish. So I feel like there's a number of things that we need to explore. I'm also interested in exploring what length of lease would be required for the rent control to apply to you. I believe currently the rules say any lease that's 3 months or more disqualifies you. And I would like to revisit that because I do think, one of the tactics that mobile home park ownership groups use when they come in is they try to buy up the units and they try to get folks on longer leases. And I think if we want to preserve this as an affordable community for the long term, I think that's something that we need to look at. I think I've said enough for tonight, and I know there's other people that want to speak, so I'll stop there.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes, thank you. And I really appreciate the comments from my fellow council members. I'm also supportive of moving forward with option 3. And I think I have an interest in number 2 as well in terms of sort of our underlying ordinance. Addressing that, I think a question in my mind is we do know that our planning staff has a lot on their plate. So as it relates to number 2, I'd welcome council comments in terms of do we move that now? Do we, for that underlying piece, do we does planning come back during their annual work plan process and we evaluate it sort of under all of the different items that they have? So I'd welcome some feedback on that from my fellow. I'm sort of open to discussion on that point. But I do think, this situation, right, has brought to light some of the, clarifications and things that we could do with the ordinance. And I guess in terms of number 3 too, I'm open to staff's work in terms of, I know there in option number 3, there's a discussion about an ordinance or an overlay. To me, I'm open in terms of, I don't know, in terms of staff applying their expertise in terms of which avenue might make more sense. I'd be open to either one. So those are my comments. I do want to thank the residents who are here, to thank them for their participation. And also to staff for bringing this to us and all the work that's been done. Thank you.
Mayor Perotti?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Good discussion. When I saw the report, well, first of all, I'll backtrack to when we first heard about what was happening. I was very saddened to hear that and very concerned for the people that live at Mobile Home Park. And then I was so proud of our city for moving forward so quickly, staff, getting engaged in, of course, it is in Councilmember Carriaco's district, and thank you for all the work that you put into it as well. So I feel a sense of all of us wanting to do all that we can to help. I support option 3. At first I look at all the options, and I think I even said to our city manager when we had our one-on-one, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many options. I want them all, And I also realized that, how do we prioritize and staff's time? They've got a lot of other stuff on their plate. But I think there is a sense of urgency, and I really appreciate the residents of the mobile home park coming and speaking, and I applaud that they are somewhat working with Harmony. That's a good thing. So I'm also open to an overlay or just an urgency ordinance, looking at other ways to keep this park a seniors park. It works. I've known a couple folks that have lived over there. They're no longer there, but I haven't been over there that often, but it seems to work. It seems like a really nice environment. So I think we should take a look at some point. Option 2, we do need to clean up our ordinance that we inherited from the county. So at some point, but I have a sense of urgency on this at this time. And those are my comments. Thank you.
I guess for me, I guess I'm not as clear, and maybe I'd need more information, but the urgency of ensuring that people can't rent to families and have to only rent to seniors is not obvious to me. And I say this, I know, I say this in a sense with some regret. I would also note I'm a senior. That, I guess it's not clear to me the compelling reason why we would have the city step in to restrict the potential for renting to non-seniors. To the extent that the community were, as another area, senior area was described as having services and developing infrastructure and doing things like that benefited seniors, so that there was an investment going on, so that there were things, because it was not diverse with, like, let's say if there's one that has lots of families, a park might decide to put in a playground or a swings or something like that, reflecting the needs of that group. Well, to the extent that this community is dedicated towards seniors, then there's a rationale that they would have facilities or services or something for seniors. Absent that, and to the extent that children are noisy and we want peace and calm, it's less compelling why we have to be urgent about excluding families under those conditions, because the needs for families, low-income families, is as high as it is for seniors. So, and I do say this, by the way, really pleased that you guys were able to get together and manage to come up with an agreement to preserve the rent control. It's very impressive. I also, and this is to our city attorney, to the extent that we are restricting the ability to rent in this area, is this kind of takings?
Mayor Pro Tem Kazin, I would note there are carve-outs under the Fair Housing Act for housing for older persons that does provide some federal authority, as well as adopted in our state version of the Fair Housing Act, that relates to that designation, that there can be housing specific to.
Okay. Okay, so did you have additional?
I do. And in fact, I have probably a little bit more than I did 5 minutes ago. So I guess to begin with, I think for me, the compelling argument for why this isn't exclusion is the fact that what it's truly about for me is preservation. The outcome of what could be termed opening it up to families is the loss of housing for what is described in our housing element as housing for special needs. And lower income seniors are a housing for special needs population captured in section 10.2 of our housing element under housing goals. So there is a harm done to our ability to comply with our housing element, from my perspective, in terms of meeting our goals, if we begin to eradicate existing stock for seniors. That's my interpretation, and I recognize that there are other interpretations, and I think we can have a respectful disagreement about that. But for me, this is about protecting what we have And when we look at the trends and we see what's happening, I mean, let's take homelessness for an example. What are the populations of folks that are more at risk now for homelessness than previously were? What is the growing area of homelessness? It's folks that are seniors. It's folks that are having to live in their vehicle because they lost their housing. I don't want to have more folks living in their vehicles because they lost their housing in order to open up what is a community that has been preserved and protected for so many years to just suddenly have lost that protection. I don't know that it's necessarily that simple, but I think we have an obligation as policymakers when we see a potentially adverse outcome to take every step that we can to prevent that outcome. We're not talking about a policy of putting an overlay over existing all ages parks that we would convert them to 55 and over if they ever change hands in the future, for example. So we're not looking at moving into other areas and becoming restrictive. What we're talking about is preservation. And so I can both see the desire to try and have housing for all ages. We want to have a diversity of housing options. It's the only way we'll remain a diverse community. But the city has other actions that it's taking. You know, I mentioned the senior housing that's being built at Heritage Ridge, but there's a whole lot of market rate housing that's also being built or is going to be coming online in the future. And families, some of the families that you're talking about will have housing opportunities there. I just don't want to lose what we have in order to try and be potentially fairer to one group that is admittedly not a special needs group as defined in our housing element. So for me, I can't go along with what you're saying. I respect it. I just happen to disagree with it. And you know, the chips will fall where they may.
I would just note low-income families are also protected. I mean, they're also, but anyway. Other comments? Anyone else have anything else they want to add? If not, let's see, what will we do? We will finish our deliberations, and I guess I will ask for a motion. If there's, Mayor Pro, did you have anything else to add? Okay. Then would anyone like to?
I'd be happy to make the motion. It is in my district. And I'll just say, if staff needs further direction, what I'm really looking at is I'm really intrigued to learn more about how the Thousand Oaks ordinance that created a senior housing overlay for mobile home parks, how that could work for us. That would be something I would be interested in. But in terms of my motion, gosh, how do I form this? I wasn't really given a sample recommendation. So I'll just say I recommend that we receive the report and that we provide direction to staff to proceed with coming back to council at the earliest regularly scheduled council meeting, an urgency ordinance to create a 55 and over senior housing overlay. I won't restrict you in terms of whether you do Thousand Oaks or not, but that's on the mind of the maker of the motion. And come back with additional options for future long-term improvements to our mobile home park ordinance. Is that clear to the clerk and the city attorney?
If I could just interject that the urgency.
Are you interjecting for a friendly amendment?
Yeah, I think so.
I think I need a seconder first.
I'll second your motion.
Okay, good. Just that as far as the urgency ordinance, you might want to separate from a discussion about long-term options and so forth, because it takes longer. And to the extent that the longer-term review would be something we would take up in the context of the budget process and so forth, it might be better to sever them.
That's a friendly amendment. I accept it.
Okay.
And Councilmember Reyes Martin, is that acceptable to you as a second? Thank you. And I would note, I think, to Mayor Pro Tem's point, it does make sense with the urgency work product to focus on that first.
Consider them A and B.
So we do have a pending motion and second on the floor.
Are you ready for a roll call vote? Okay. Councilmember Reyes Martin,
Aye.
Councilmember Carriaco,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Porkasden,
No.
and Mayor Perotti.
Aye.
So the motion passes. Congratulations. And do you guys want a break? Yeah, 5 minutes. Okay. Okay, let's move to our next item.
That will be item C2, resolution opposing new offshore oil leases in federal waters.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. My name is Shannon Kern, Assistant to the City Manager. And so before you today is a resolution opposing new offshore oil and gas leases in the federal waters off the coast of California. So the Central Coast has experienced firsthand the devastating impacts of offshore oil operations, notably the 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill and the 2015 Refugio pipeline rupture, so in which both of these caused significant environmental and economic impacts. So last month, the Secretary of the Interior announced the initial analysis and proposal for the National Outer Continental Shelf Oil and Gas Lease Program, which includes 6 proposed lease sales along the coast of California, along the Pacific coast, and with leases scheduled to commence in 2027. And right now, a public comment period is open, and it will close on January 23rd, 2026. So this resolution, if adopted, staff will transmit to the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management as part of the city's formal response during this comment period. And I also wanted to note that this action does align with our 2025 and 2026 legislative platform, and it does reinforce our commitment to protecting coastal resources and advancing climate goals. That concludes my very brief presentation, so I'll pass it over to Mayor Pro Tem and Council for comments, questions.
Thank you, Ms. Kern. Councilmember Reyes-Martin.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Ms. Kern and staff for jumping on this and getting it for the agenda today, because there is a date in somewhat early January where comment letters need to be submitted. Thank you to Councilmember Kiriakou for concurring to bring this forward to council for consideration. As was mentioned, it's definitely in line with our legislative platform as well as previous council resolutions even before my time on the council. So it's definitely in line with Galida's DNA to make our comments on issues like this. And this is such an important issue that affects not just Goleta, but all of California. And with this resolution, if adopted, we would be joining comment letters from other cities and counties all across California who are deeply concerned by the possibility of having expanded offshore oil facilities off the coast of California. So thank you. I'll keep my comments succinct, but thank you so much for getting this to us.
Mayor Parodi.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just want to thank Councilmember Luz Reyes-Martin and Councilmember Kiriakou for bringing this up and to our attention on December 2nd meeting. I'm very proud of the city of Goleta for always opposing oil being drilled off our coast, and also the fact that I am very proud to be the one to put my name on this resolution. So thank you very much.
I did have a question. Did you already speak? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Your name has been, anyway. I remember it coming up a number of years ago in which the state of California did something like deny access to the, for shipping the oils. Now, maybe that was tankers or something like that, but I guess I'm curious as far as what the state could or might or has discussed doing, if you're aware of that. Because in other words, you have the federal waters, and this is taking place in federal waters, and then they're shipping it or pumping it or having to get, some sort of access to the coast through state waters. And I believe it was Senator Hannah-Beth Jackson's office that restricted or limited or burdened the federal government in terms of being able to move the oil. And have you sound familiar?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I think that there are a couple different things going on right now as it relates to oil and gas leases, and I think that also includes, the American Pipeline, the Sable Pipeline, and so those are happening as well. And so I know that the state has been opposed to any, new, and our legislators, right, opposed to any new pipelines. But I don't know in specifics to if they're doing a public comment period, if they're submitting a public comment. I think they might have, but I'd have to get back and I'd have to look at the news.
Yeah, no, I guess they wouldn't have really, it's too early for them to be actually making statements about here's what we'll do if they pass this and if they go forward. But I didn't know if you'd heard anything. And, I'm glad that we could do this. And like with all the things going on, it's just the first step forward, but a step nonetheless. So, Councilmember Kiriakou.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I want to thank Councilmember Reyes-Martin for bringing this resolution. I think perhaps one of the under-discussed elements of all of this is the impact that these types of matters has not only on our environment but rather on our economy. When we think about the economic impact associated with what happens when oil development goes horribly wrong, it's incredibly taxing, it's incredibly expensive, it's incredibly damaging to our local economy. For all the jobs that can be created by having offshore oil leases and tankering and pipelines and all of these things, it pales in comparison to the economic impact on cities and towns like Goleta when things go wrong, when you have a blowout off the coast, when you have a pipeline blowout on the coast and then get into the ocean. The impact it has on tourism, the impact it has on industry, the impact that it has on our regional, national, and international reputation. Those are all financial impacts, and they shouldn't be lost in this discussion. We're here to stand up for our residents, and our residents want to preserve and protect the quality of life that they've come to expect and enjoy. But part of that also is looking out for our local economy. And if we can just be one more voice out there saying to the federal government, don't do this, then I think that is worth it, because the cost not only to our environment but our economy would be too great.
Okay. Any public comments?
Yes, I do have one speaker slip for Michael Johnson. For those of you on the Zoom webinar who wish to speak to this item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. All speakers will have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Michael Johnson. I'm a longtime resident of Goleta. Since 1998, I've raised my 4 children here, all whom graduated from Dos Pueblos High School. Our family has spent countless days enjoying Haskell's Beach near the Elwood onshore facility, going back to the days when you could drive right up to the beach. Kind of miss those days. The same beautiful coastline we cherish today is where we spend time. My kids have grown up here, and now my 6 grandchildren still live locally. And I want them to grow up in a safe and vibrant Goleta, as we all know as the Good Land. I'm also the current owner of the Elwood onshore facility, the last remnant of the historic oil processing in our area. I acquired this property after it's been disconnected from the offshore oil with the sole intent to repurpose it, never to operate it for oil and gas. When we took ownership, the site's equipment and pipes contained lethal amounts of poisonous hydrosulfide gas and black hydrocarbons. It was lethal. The previous operator went bankrupt, leaving no resources for cleanup and abandonment, and abandoning this hazard into our community. At our expense, with no help from those oil companies or public funds, we undertook thorough remediation process. We flushed and purged over 920 individual pipes and pressure washed the interior of all the equipment and opened everything up to the atmosphere so that it will no longer pose a threat. In November of 2024, the site was declared hydrocarbon-free by the City of Goleta and the Air Pollution Control District. Now that the site is safe and no further damage can occur from the oil, we are committed to the next phase, full remediation and beneficial reuse. We are working closely with state agencies, including the Regional Water Quality Control Board and our environmental consultants, to ensure that this process is done thoughtfully and serves the public. As the owner of the property that the Elwood facility was on, I formally declare that Elwood is no longer an oil and gas facility, and it will never be again. I appreciate the strong city stance against offshore oil and any risk to our coast. It comes from the love that you have for the people of this community. Resolutions like this demonstrate your deep commitment to protecting Goleta's environment. The city has been a long valued partner in envisioning a positive future for the coastal property. I look forward to continued collaboration to transform the old Elwood onshore facility into a true asset for our special place here at Goleta. We'll be coming to the City Council in the future, but I thought today's seemed like a fitting time to just give a little brief update. We've been very private about our endeavors and pushing forward to, and this was the first, the oil and gas on the Planning Commission was our first, but that was last week. This was the first time that we could really come in front of you and kind of say, hey, one more nail in the coffin. Thank you all.
Thank you.
And that concludes public comment.
Okay. All right, let's, well, it just struck me, actually, I just had a thought. The administration has also proposed to open up this is Deborah Williams, this is for you, the Tongass, which is a national forest in Alaska, and to do the timbering there, to harvest the timber, you have to build roads, and it is below cost. So in other words, building the roads, harvesting the trees, all of that costs more than the value of the trees that they harvest. That was long a problem for the Forest Service, these below-cost sales. The administration is mostly offering that up in some ways as performative, just a signal. And I think this is like a number of other things. They're proposing to open up the California coast, not because it's going to be lucrative, not because it's a really wise thing to do or makes sense, but simply to send a message of, we support oil, we hate climate change, doing anything against it, and this is our way of telling people, screw you, I guess. But anyway, please, I'll stop musing.
Thank you. All right, I move that we adopt resolution number 25 next in line, entitled "A Resolution of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, opposing new offshore oil leases in federal waters."
And I'll second.
Okay. Councilmember Reyes Martin.
Aye.
Councilmember Kiriakou.
Aye.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Porkasden.
Aye.
And Mayor Perotti.
Aye.
Okay, and thank you very much.
That'll bring us to item C3, fiscal year 2025-26 first quarter financial review and approving side letter agreements with the SCIU Local 620 and salary schedule amendments.
Mr. Rio, you have a presentation.
Okay, it feels like it's been a while. So anyways, good evening, Madam Mayor, members of City Council, and members of the public. I'm Luke Rio, City of Galida's Finance Director. And tonight's item has two main parts. We're going to give you a high-level summary of the first quarter financial update for July 1st through September 30th, 2025, including recommended budget amendments, and then including salary schedule actions with SEIU side letters and citywide salary schedule updates, some of which were contingent on direction from closed session. So we'll actually have a slide on that. Let's see, so jumping right in, this slide shows where we started, where we are now, and what we are recommending tonight. So three key takeaways from this is that the City of Goleta adopted its fiscal year 25-26 adopted general fund budget at $53.5 million. That was approved on June 17, 2025. The current budget is about $77.1 million, and that's mainly because we finalized $23.2 million in carryovers from last fiscal year's one-time projects and CIP activity, plus there was about $400,000 in new appropriations that were approved since July 1st. For Q1, staff is recommending a net revenue adjustment of $18,000, so a decrease just related to a double counting of interest revenue, and then a net expenditure increase of $845,274. And we'll get into that on a separate slide. This next slide is a summary of revenue adjustments. It's a very high-level snapshot of our general fund revenues, just showcasing current budget and actuals. And then also with that recommended revision that we just discussed. There's more details in the staff report, but some of the major highlights I just wanted to touch on are some of our major revenue sources, which includes property tax revenues. They are trending as expected, but though when you do look at the actuals or compare it to the prior year quarters, you'll see that there's a decrease of about 27.4%. That's primarily related to documentary transfer tax that was received through the quarter. And so that's related to when there's changes with properties or sales of properties. And we did anticipate this drop just given the high interest rate environment, reduced transactional value, and the low inventory that's out there in Goleta. The other category I wanted to touch on was sales tax, the 1% Bradley Burns. That was estimated to reach $8.8 million, and it is while it's tracking in lower in comparison to prior year's quarter, it's actually relatively flat. But when you look at it in the documents, it's primarily just due to when the payment was received. And so when you do an accrual analysis or when you account for it, we're actually relatively flat. We're about 0.02% above the prior year. And then the other major revenue source is the transaction use tax. So that's the Measure B. That's now projected to be our second largest general fund revenue source, representing about 21.9% of our general fund revenues. Through the end of the first quarter, we totaled about $1.09 million. And it continues to trend in line with our original projections. I should mention, though, when you do look at in the staff report, we do have some information about when you look at it from an accrual basis, we're actually 58.2% up compared to the prior year for the same quarter. And that was primarily due to greater compliance and improved reporting as the businesses adjusted to the new tax and staff's ongoing work with consultants and the California Department of Tax and Fee Administration to identify and recovering missing tax payments. So there are several large one-time recoveries, which will temporarily skew the numbers or performance when we do look at this on a longer-term basis. But going forward, we're going to have complete year-over-year comparative data, and then when we do go into the next year's budget cycle or budget process, we'll be identifying those one-time revenue recoveries, just so that it doesn't skew what we expect to receive in the long run. And then the other last major revenue source I wanted to touch on was transient occupancy tax. As of September 30th, 2025, on a cash basis, we were at $2 million. That primarily reflects the July and August portion of the receipts received. When you look at it on an accrual basis, TOT revenues were about $4.5 million and was trending slightly higher than last year. And I also wanted to point out in the staff report, we do include a section about short-term vacation rentals, including the numbers that are licensed and also the revenue performance. Short-term vacation rental revenues were about up 23.4%, with the bulk of it just being received through Airbnb. Okay, moving on to summary of general fund expenditures. So again, this is a snapshot, high-level snapshot on a department basis, and where we've finished off at the end of the quarter. The general fund expenditure budget is at 77 million. And again, that includes our one-time carryovers. Through Q1, total expenditures were about 8.7 million, roughly about 11%, and which is normal, just given the timing of costs and the fact that many expenditures do occur later in the year, and a significant amount of them are related to capital improvement projects. For recommended revisions, there's a couple of them highlighted here in this table. General services, we're recommending an increase of 34,000 for temporary staffing support tied to project workload and operational coverage. With Public Works, there's a $399,200 adjustment. This adjustment includes about $11,500 related to utility reimbursement costs tied to previous year, about $187,700 for consultant encroachment permit processing support, which will also be offset by revenues in the adopted budget. And then there's this $200,000 increase related for non-reimbursable development engineering support, which included for county project review that impacts city infrastructure. So that's just the non-reimbursable part that we did not have in our budget. So we're requesting that as part of this this quarter. And then lastly, I wanted to point out there's a non-departmental $400,000. So this is really just a shift of appropriations that we have in reserves related to contributions for our OPEB, our other post-employment benefit liability funds, and the pension unfunded accrued liability fund. So we're recommending transferring that into the Section 115 trust that we have, and we have a little bit more details of that in the staff report. And then lastly, that $12,000 just related to a cleanup item to offset funds that were related to the Goleta Community Center seismic retrofit as part of final grant closeout. So we were needing that additional money to close out, the project. Moving on to personnel updates. So on a very high level, key takeaways from this, staffs are recommending several flex reclassifications in both planning and public works just to support recruitment and reduce future schedule cleanups. And this was part of when City Council adopted the updated MOUs and personnel rules last year in April 2024. We're also cleaning up reverting a grandfathered senior project engineer classification back to the senior engineer, since that grandfather position is no longer needed. And then we're recommending reallocation of an intern 2 position to align with the funding source and how the intern will actually be utilized in supporting public works. Other personnel updates, so again, very high level in here, and it could get a little confusing when going through the report, but there is essentially two salary schedules. There's an hourly wage schedule that's being recommended to be adopted effective December 27, 2025, and that's to adjust the entry rates to match the California minimum wage, that law that goes in effect January 1st. And then we're also recommending maintaining that 40-cent spread across the hourly classifications. And so there's a table in the staff report that further details those rates. And then the other salary schedule is related to the SEIU and unrepresented COLAs. And that's following the discussion direction that was mentioned earlier, provided from closed session this evening. The city and SEIU Local 620 had reached a tentative agreement subject to city council approval to modify the cost of living adjustment methodology that was impacted by the government shutdown due to the unavailability of the October CPI. And so we actually have a separate slide on that where I'll turn it over to our city attorney to go over the required oral report on that. And then I wanted to mention the city council compensation. So the government shutdown also did affect census data that we would normally have in the beginning of December. And so that data is delayed until January 29, 2026. We'll actually be returning back to city council on updating the salary schedule to ratify or to correct that amount as soon as it's known. And so more to come on that. So moving on, this is a high-level snapshot of our fund balance and reserves. This provides an updated number as of June 30th, 2025, and also the revised estimated fund balance as of June 30th, 2026. So these estimates have been updated to reflect the actual 24-25 revenues and expenditures, as well as the final carryover amounts. And I did want to highlight a couple of key items here, key categories. Give me a second. Allowance for doubtful accounts. I wanted to point this one out. And this is related to working with our auditors and identifying accounts that we've deemed somewhat that's possibly uncollectible in the future. And because we've had this about this amount on our books for a certain period of time, it's recommended that we do hold this and then adjust this potentially over time as the funds do become available. There's more details in the staff report, but it's a recommended best practice to make sure we have a hedge against that likelihood that the funds are not deemed collectible. Then another category I wanted to highlight here is what was just touched on mentioned about the OPEB and the CalPERS pension UAL that's going to be transferred to the Section 115 trust. So we legally have to appropriate the funds. Then it will be transferred into our Section 115 trust. So it's essentially shifting it out of the city's bank account into the special trust that's related to the retiree health care and the pensions. And then the CIP project funding next year, just to help clarify some of this, the categories here. This $2.4 million that's here, this was related to the new one-time appropriations that was set aside as part of our budget strategy in adopting our recent 25-26 budget. So what we did was we had set aside early on about that amount that went towards San Jose Creek fish capacity of about $750,000, and then $1.5 million went towards the Goleta Valley Library ADA Safety and Building Improvement Project. And then what's highlighted here or circled here, the CIP project funding prior year and encumbrances, these are purely related to the carryovers. So that's now reflected and appropriated in the current year budget. And then I wanted to showcase this number here, the $7.2 million. So we go into a little bit more detail of this in the staff report, but really what this represents is the set aside that staff's recommending right now to ensure that we are able to fund what kind of the activity that was discussed with the Shelby litigation agreement and also the funding gaps that were discussed during the budget adoption process of the Big Six capital projects. And so this is kind of another budget strategy, kind of what we've done in the past, just to ensure that we have funding set aside to complete those must-do capital projects and also what we're required to do per the agreement related obligations with the Shelby settlement. And then lastly, here is the unassigned fund balance. After accounting for all the adjustments and set-asides, the projected ending unassigned fund balance is approximately $834,000. Then I did want to mention, staff is actively evaluating our reserve categories, specifically the city's own facilities, and is developing a formal funding policy to support ongoing maintenance, major repairs, and system replacements. There was a draft framework that was presented to the Finance Committee and will return to City Council at a future meeting. This next slide, again, just kind of that recap of the priority CIP projects, the Big Six. So this was taken from the, the June 17th City Council meeting, just as a recap of what, that set aside was related to. So again, we can now say that we do have funding fully set aside for the Goleta Valley Library Building Safety and ADA Improvement Project and also the San Jose Creek Fish Passage Modification Project. I do want to, point out though, this is, we are going to have further discussions on this when we go through the mid-cycle budget update process, because we do need to fine-tune these numbers just to make sure we have them right. There wasn't any additional funding that was identified, and the project cost estimates are still what they were when we, estimated them back in June. So more to come. So included in the packet, in full detail, we do have attachment 3 includes the entire listing of all of our special revenue funds. Attachment 4 includes the entire listing of all of our CIP projects. And then Attachment 5, Exhibit A, includes all the various recommended adjustments, more specifically to all the special revenue funds, and so they could either be grant cleanup or grant cleanup adjustments and appropriations and transfers, and so that can be seen in full detail in Attachment 5, Exhibit A. Looking ahead, so the table just outlines the next key meeting dates we'll have on the quarterly financial reviews, but we will have the fiscal year 26-27 mid-cycle budget update here starting in January, February. Now, as a recap, the purpose of that mid-cycle update is to review our current revenue and expenditures, make necessary adjustments due to changing economic environment, also adjusting for any contractual obligations, aligning priorities with the updated work programs and the 2-year strategic plan. It's not meant to be an overhaul of the entire budget. and make significant changes, but it is, that would be part of the next tier cycle, but it'll give a chance to discuss also any ongoing fiscal issues that we still have ahead. We plan to approach this with an updated 5-year outlook, recap of how we program fiscal year 26-27, a reminder of what was temporarily reduced and what items still needed further refinement, like our operations of the Goleta Train Depot. So that those discussions will be coming. Okay, with that said, before we get into the oral report, I did want to point out in the staff report, there is a section about a fee waiver being recommended and needing council approval. So at the December 2nd, 2025 City Council meeting, Mayor Pro Tem Kazan requested a concurrence in support of a fee waiver for Gersh Park related to permitting fees associated with its soccer field lighting project. Councilmember Kiriakou concurred with this request. If the fee waiver is approved, the fiscal impact would be approximately $7,342.47 and would need to be supported by the general fund. And so that's is included as one of the main recommendations. And then we also have the recommendations on the budget and position amendments, and that's the recommendation B. And then I'm going to turn it over to our city attorney, who will give an oral report about the other recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Rios. Yeah, so as listed here on staff's recommendation under C, that language has been filled in consistent with the City Council's closed session earlier this evening, although final action rests, of course, with this item on the open session agenda. As Mr. Rio noted, and pursuant to Government Code Section 54953 D3A, the city must receive an oral report before approving a change in the salary schedules, or compensation paid in the form of fringe benefits to a local agency executive or department head before taking final action. This evening's proposed action, and as written on this slide, includes a resolution that would include a 3.7% salary increase, which does include applicability to unrepresented management, city department heads, and this is reflected in the supplemental salary schedule that has been provided as an attachment, as well as being available online and in chambers, and as described by our finance director.
All right, thank you. So that concludes our presentation. So if there's any questions, happy to take them.
I have a question, if others don't. So I saw that the federal government was looking to reclassify cannabis and at a lower schedule. Is that likely to have an impact on our revenues, if, at least eventually? Is that one of the things, in other words, is it the federal government's classifications? Is the change in the classification enough so that they'd be able to use the banking systems and do all the things to enable the industry to prosper?
Yeah, Mayor Pro Tem, so that's a good question. In terms of revenues, it would be somewhat speculation on performance, but it would definitely help the businesses. So I would look at it in terms of operating costs for businesses. It would allow them to, access banking, financing, loans, and also for tax purposes, they'd be able to take business tax deductions. So it would definitely help the businesses, and and theoretically, in turn, could help with revenues. But again, it's kind of
Yeah. But that would, if we were to look at a graph of the revenues, it's just for cannabis, it's been a continuous decline. The other question I had is you have not, if I'm correct, incorporated the $11 million that we have been crossing our fingers with respect to the federal government to reimburse us for expenses for projects, Project Connect, by which would then free up general fund revenues. That's correct? And at what point do you think we might cross our fingers?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's correct. Has not been formally appropriated just yet until there's an agreement finalized and signed. We plan to have an update at second quarter, our mid-year report, most likely in February.
Okay. So that would be probably when we do our budget process, that we'll be in a position to consider those funds.
there will be an update on that.
Okay, that was a cautious response. All right, then. Those are my questions. Thank you. Councilmember Carriaco?
I guess just a question. The funds in question, I believe those are funds that would be available for us to request reimbursement for. Is that correct? It wouldn't just be
Right.
money coming.
Councilmember
to
Kiriakou,
us.
are you following up on
the
Councilmember
11 million?
the
that
grant
I-
that we
11 million,
that we
yes.
received for the San Jose
San Jose
Multipurpose
Creek,
Trail?
yes.
Got it.
Yeah. So I just, in terms of thinking ahead to, if and when we get an update that indicates that's been appropriated, even at the state level, I would want to make sure we had really clear city attorney guidance that that money couldn't be taken back by the federal government before I'd want to start making, serious plans for how to use that money to backfill other priorities.
Oh, I'm making plans.
I'll stop there then, before you make more.
Yes. Okay, let's go to public, or Mayor Prodi, did you have anything you?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay. Any public comment?
Yes, those of you on the Zoom webinar who wishes to speak to this item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. I am seeing none.
Okay. Councilmember Reyes-Martin?
I guess just a quick comment. I wanted to say how there's going to be so much attention, I think, on budgets in the next few months, whether it's cities, counties, the state. The County of Santa Barbara had a conversation earlier today at their meeting. I know they have very unique challenges that they're faced with. For our residents to, hope they come back and tune in to watch your presentation or read the report, to have some confidence that as a city and as a council, and a lot of credit to even previous councils, have been very prudent about how the city manages its resources and its budget. I feel much more confident and optimistic that we'll be able to weather a lot of uncertainty and a lot of things that are coming up, some massive, massive projects that the city has, and we've had plans to ensure that they get completed, and that we have appropriate funding sources for those. So I just really want to thank you and your team and the whole city team for making this positive presentation where we are right now. And I also wanted to add, I was really glad to hear your comment about thinking about reserve policies for specific things like maintenance. We do, as a city, have so many different city-owned and operated assets, and we're going to bring another really big one online soon. And so I think that is very, very prudent, because those are the things that can become surprises that are not anticipated. And, if you squirrel away that money little by little and have a good reserve policy that's appropriate to the facility or the different things, I think that's also very, very prudent. So thank you. And thank you to the Finance Committee for reviewing this too.
Okay. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'll take a stab at it. Okay.
A lot of reading.
Yeah, all right. So first, I would move approval of A, that we approve the fee waiver and refund request from Gersh Park in the amount of $7,342.47 for permitting fees associated with its soccer field lighting project, based on the City Council's determination that the project provides a community benefit and that the refund serves a legitimate public purpose and does not constitute a gift of public funds. And B, adopt Resolution 25 next in line, entitled A Resolution of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, amending the City of Goleta operating and CIP budget for fiscal year 2025 and 2026, amending the City of Goleta schedule of authorized positions for fiscal year 25-26, and amending the City of Goleta salary schedule and classification plan for fiscal year 25-26, effective December 27th, 2025. And I'm wondering if that slide, would it be possible to have, oh, is it here?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Let's see. And then also recommend C, that we have received the oral report read by the city clerk in summarizing the recommendation for final action on salary schedules, compensation paid to city executive employees as follows. Number one, for all executive management employees except the city manager, adoption of an amended salary schedules that A, establishes a fixed percentage salary increase to be determined. Oh, goodness, thank you. Yes. Amended salary schedules A, that establishes a fixed 3.7% percentage salary increase effective January 10th, 2026, replacing the prior contingent CPI formula that provided a base 3.0% plus an additional amount of up to 1% based on the year-over-year October Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers, CPIU, for the Los Angeles, Long Beach, Anaheim region, and B, amends the formula for the January 2027 increase to utilize the September CPIU instead of October, and establishes a fallback method in the event of the September CPIU is not established, consistent with the negotiated side letter with SEIU, and move support of item D, adopt resolution 25 next in line, entitled a resolution of the City Council of the City of Goleta, California, approving side letter agreements with SEIU Local 620, amending the City of Goleta salary schedule and classification plan for fiscal year 2025-26, effective January 10th, 2026, and approving certain future salary increases.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Would you?
I'll second.
Okay.
Councilmember Reyes Martin,
Aye.
Councilmember Carriaco,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan,
Aye.
and Mayor Perotti.
Aye.
Okay, how exciting. So, do any council members have any comments?
I think we have
Where's
one
my,
more. Selection of the Mayor Pro
I
Tempore.
don't think I have a D1 on here. There's a D1. Okay. I know, I remember reading a D1, but thank you. So let's move to the last one, where I'm deposed.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tempore. Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Dave Kataya, the Senior Deputy City Clerk. Resolution 0558 establishes the procedure for the City Council to select the Mayor Pro Tempore from members of the City Council annually. As of 2018, the mayor is directly elected by the voters. The Mayor Pro Tempore also serves as the Vice Chair to the Goleta RDA Successor Agency and the Goleta Facilities Finance Authority. Tonight, we will take nominations for Mayor Pro Tempore, who will serve in that position until December of 2026. The nominations do not require a second. A brief overview of the process. We can take any questions or comments from council first. Then I will check for a public comment on this item. I will then open the nomination period for Mayor Pro Tempore. Once we have the nomination or nominations, we will take a roll call vote on each nomination in the order which it was received until a Mayor Pro Tempore is chosen. With that, are there any questions or comments from council?
So, are there any nominations?
Could I ask for a public comment?
Oh, sorry.
Any member of the public who wishes to speak to this item, please use the raised hand icon and I will call on you. And I am seeing none. And with that, nomination period is open.
Oh. Councilmember Reyes Martin.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Mayor Pro Tem Kasdan for serving as Mayor Pro Tem. You really got to do a lot this last these last few weeks. He did a great job, Mayor Perotti. I would like to nominate Councilmember Smith for Mayor Pro Tem.
And do you accept this nomination?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have any other nominations? Okay, great. Then I will take a roll call vote. Councilmember Reyes Martin,
Aye.
Councilmember Kiriakou,
Aye.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Pork Hasden,
Aye.
and Mayor Perotti.
Aye.
Okay.
I'd like
Councilmembers-
to make a comment real quick.
Please.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Please.
Kasdan, how are you feeling? Is that possible?
Yeah,
Okay.
why not?
I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You have filled in for me probably more than any other mayor pro tem has, whether I was sick with pneumonia and now having my knee replaced. You just jumped in and took charge and did it well and never told me, no, I can't do it. Yes, of course I can do it. So, thank you. I sincerely thank you for the work put in. And I look forward to working with Council Member Smith. I promise I won't put you to that much work. I think I'm going to be, 2026 is going to be a good, healthy year for me.
Very good. Definitely. Okay, do any council members have any comments?
I do have a couple.
Okay, I'm glad you warned us.
Thank you, if you'll indulge me. First, I concluded my service as the City of Goleta's representative to Central Coast Community Energy. We had our last meeting last week. So now our shared seat goes to the City of Carpinteria. It was really, really eye-opening and informative to serve on that policy board. There's so much going on, and it's really important that we, as a council, really advocated to have a representative on that board, and at the very least, share it with another jurisdiction. And along those lines, I did want to let the council know that there is a California Public Utilities Commission meeting this week, and 3CE asked all of the policy board members if they would be willing to send in a public comment for a proposed regulatory fee change that we believe would increase electricity costs for the constituents in our city that do receive electricity from 3CE. So I did send in a public comment letter just on behalf of myself. I made it clear that I was speaking as an individual council member, not on behalf of the whole city. So I did want to just note that for everyone. And then I did want to wish my son a happy birthday. It is his birthday today. I don't think he's going to be watching the council meeting, but happy birthday. He had a basketball game, and I received a note that he had 14 points, 9 rebounds, and 5 steals.
Wow.
And they won. So sounds like a great night for a young boy. And lastly, I did want to just, maybe in memory of a recent passing of a resident, it happens to be in my district, but Betty Kelly passed away a few weeks ago. She was a longtime resident at Encino Royale and was very, very active with that community and within the Goleta community at Live Oak Unitarian Church. And as a quilter, she lived to 97 3/4 and had a beautiful, prolific life. A lot of her extended family also live here on the South Coast, and I had the joy of attending a celebration of her life this weekend. So I did want to just note that in her memory. She will be dearly missed.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes, thank you. First, I wanted to thank the council for your nomination. I have tough shoes to fill, so I look forward to serving as Mayor Pro Tem next year, and Mayor Perotti, I look forward to working with you. I also wanted to note, I attended the county's, along with the city manager, attended the county's ribbon cutting on December 9th for the Regional Fire Communications Center and the expanded Emergency Operations Center. And it is really, it's quite astonishing to really see it in action and to see everything there. And even got to witness some of the dispatchers, working live and to see how they do it, and the video screens and the technology, it was really incredible. And regionally should improve fire and ambulance communication, and that includes Goleta. So it was great to see that. And so I would recommend, if anybody does get the opportunity to visit that center, I definitely recommend it. And then I would just note the Finance Committee did meet, but the council sort of, reviewed the items that were discussed, and other items will come back at a future meeting.
Okay, actually, my son's birthday is tomorrow, and my wife's birthday is on the 19th. So, yeah, it's birthday season. So, our city attorney, okay, well then, do we have any more meetings? This is it through the holiday? Okay, then happy holidays, everybody, and stay safe and happy, and bye now.
Good to
Happy
see you,
holiday.
Mayor.
See all of you.
See ya.